All right, let's get right into it. Today we're talking about a man who for decades was all over the world news, Saddam Hussein. He was a really complex figure, a nation builder to some, a genocidal tyrant to others. And his actions, well, they're still making waves in our world today.
So, think about this. The story ends, or at least the beginning of the end starts, with this massive international conflict. But how did we get there? How does one guy invading a tiny little nation get 35 countries to unite and come after him? To really get that, we've got to go back.
You see, the Gulf War didn't just pop up out of nowhere in 1990. Its roots go back more than a decade. It really kicks off in '79 when the Islamic Revolution in Iran just sends these shockwaves across the whole region. Saddam, fearing that revolution would spread to Iraq, launches what he thinks is going to be a quick, easy invasion of Iran. Instead, it turns into a horrible 8-year war that completely wrecks Iraq's economy, leaving it with $40 billion in debt. And here's the kicker. A lot of that money was owed to his small, oil-rich neighbors.
But, to really understand why a leader would make a gamble like that, you have to rewind way further. You have to go back to his childhood, which was shaped by so much tragedy and violence, it basically forged the man he would become. So Saddam Hussein was born back in 1937, and his start in life was just unbelievably tough. His dad died before he was even born, then his older brother died of cancer. His mother was so devastated, so grief-stricken, that she actually thought about taking her own life. What a way to enter the world, right?
And it only got worse. His mom remarried, and Saddam's life just became this constant nightmare. His stepfather abused him relentlessly. And that kind of torment, well, it builds something in a kid, a real aggression, and this stubborn, iron-willed refusal to ever be broken. By the time he was just 10 years old, he'd had enough. He ran away to live with his uncle.
And listen, this right here, this is the moment everything changes. His uncle, an army officer and a strong nationalist, basically becomes the father figure he never had. He sees ambition in young Saddam and just pours gasoline on it, filling his head with ideas about Arab nationalism. And then he gives him the perfect tool for that ambition, the radical Ba'ath Party. Saddam joined when he was only 20.
So, armed with this new ideology and just a burning desire for power, Saddam didn't just, enter politics. He exploded onto the scene. And his climb to the top wasn't going to be about winning votes. No, it was going to be about bullets and plots and backroom coups. Just look at this. It reads less like a resume and more like the rap sheet for a political gangster, right? A botched hit on the prime minister, he goes into exile, comes back, plots again, and ends up in prison. But here's the thing. For Saddam, prison was like grad school. They say he spent his time just studying the playbooks of guys like Hitler and Stalin, learning all about purges, cults of personality, and how to use pure terror to get total control. So when he escapes, his ruthlessness is actually rewarded. By 1968, after one more coup, he's the second most powerful man in all of Iraq. And as vice president, Saddam really showed the two sides that would come to define his entire rule. On one side, he was this incredible modernizer, a real nation builder. But on the other, he was a stone-cold enforcer, busy perfecting the tools of terror. And this is exactly why he became so popular with so many people. The 1970s, Iraq was just swimming in oil money after he nationalized the industry, and Saddam used it to oversee what a lot of Iraqis still call a golden age. We're talking new roads, modern hospitals, and a free education system that was seriously the best in the Arab world. He did such a good job that he even won an award from UNESCO for it. Think about that. But, and this is a huge but, that same oil money that was building schools, it was also secretly paying for a gigantic military buildup and a terrifying internal security force. So while one hand was building up the country, the other was, signing off on death warrants for anyone he even thought might be a threat. The absolute most horrific example of this was the Anfal campaign against Iraq's Kurdish population. His regime, it systematically murdered or just disappeared an estimated 182,000 Kurds. He even infamously used chemical weapons, poison gas, on entire villages. This wasn't just putting down a rebellion, this was straight-up genocide.
So how did he lock down his power completely? Well, in 1979, he pressures the president, his own cousin, to resign. A week later, he calls a big meeting of the Ba'ath Party leaders, and this whole thing was televised. Imagine this. He gets up at a podium and starts reading a list of names, 68 of them, calling them traitors. And one by one, they're dragged out of the room, right there on camera. Many of them were executed almost immediately. It was this chilling, brutal piece of political theater, and it sent a crystal clear message to everyone: absolutely no one is safe from me.
So now he's the undisputed, absolute ruler of Iraq, and that ambition, which had been focused on consolidating power at home, starts to look outward. And this shift, it would lead to two absolutely catastrophic wars that would ultimately seal his fate and shatter his country.
He looked at the new Islamic Republic in Iran and saw both a threat and an opportunity. He figured he could roll in there, grab some territory, and win a quick, glorious victory. He could not have been more wrong. The war just dragged on, becoming this brutal, bloody stalemate, almost like a replay of World War I's trench warfare. By the time it was over 8 years later, nothing was gained. Hundreds of thousands of people were dead, and Iraq was completely broke.
And this is where all the pieces come together. He's massively in debt, a lot of it to Kuwait, so he looks at his tiny, unbelievably rich neighbor and sees an easy solution. He cooks up this accusation that they're slant drilling under the border to steal Iraqi oil, and he demands they forgive his war debts. They refused, and on August 2nd, 1990, his tanks rolled right across the border.
Saddam clearly thought the other Arab nations would just look the other way, and that the rest of the world wouldn't bother to do anything. Man, was he wrong again. His invasion was such a clear violation of international law that the world's response was, well, it was unprecedented. A massive coalition of 35 countries, led by the United States, came together to push him out of Kuwait.
And what came next was Operation Desert Storm. The coalition's technology, its air power, it was just completely overwhelming. After weeks of bombing from the air, the ground war to actually free Kuwait lasted for only about 100 hours. The Iraqi army, which had been hyped up as this massive, powerful force, was just completely and utterly smashed.
But as his defeated army retreated, they committed one last terrible act of destruction. They set fire to nearly 1,000 of Kuwait's oil wells. It created this apocalyptic environmental disaster that literally blackened the skies and poisoned the entire region for years. It was just pure spite. Now, despite that crushing defeat and years of tough international sanctions, Saddam somehow managed to hang on to power. But after the 2003 US-led invasion, his whole regime just fell apart. And the man who had lived in dozens of insanely lavish palaces, who used body doubles to protect himself, was found months later, dirty, disoriented, and hiding all by himself in a tiny hole in the ground. The difference between the before and after is just mind-blowing.
So after he was captured, Saddam Hussein was put on trial by an Iraqi court. He was found guilty of crimes against humanity, and he was executed in 2006. But his death, it didn't really bring any closure. It certainly didn't end the debate over his incredibly complicated legacy.
And this, to me, is what's so fascinating. Even today, how you see Saddam totally depends on who you ask. For some Iraqis, especially those who remember the golden period, he was a strong leader who built a modern country and wasn't afraid to stand up to the West. For countless others, though, he was a monster, a ruthless tyrant who ruled with terror and led his nation into total ruin. The crazy part is, both of those truths kind of exist at the same time.
It all leaves you with this really big question, doesn't it? Saddam started out as a revolutionary, fighting for an idea. And he really did build a modern state. But was his story ultimately about how that absolute, all-consuming hunger for power inevitably corrupts? How a man who saw himself as his country's hero could end up becoming its greatest destroyer? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining me.